the intention of this webinar is to look at how we can use AI more from a macro standpoint, or a general, like, you know, uh, I'm looking forward to the last 30 minutes of this. I really do want to make this a conversation after we go through our little spiel here, but the intention is to look at how do we think we can use AI to improve our coaching practice. Because I'll talk about it a few times as we go through, and in the class that'll come out next week, I was really transparent on how we actually don't know what this is going to be in, gosh, tomorrow, let alone in the next 6 months, because AI today is a lot different than what AI was in January. So just from like a thought experiment standpoint, I think it's going to be great just to kind of bounce some ideas back and forth, and we'll give our spiel, and then just seeing how you guys are actually using AI, because it looks like probably 50% of people on this call are using it in some aspect. But we'll dive in. So thanks for everyone that took the time to join us today. We've been discussing the role that AI might play in coaching since probably 2016. Again, shout out to James Fitzgerald. He's always a little bit ahead of his time on some of these things. He was really worried about this in 2016, where it's like, dude, we have plenty of time. Don't worry about it. But it has been a topic of conversation. And we've always thrown around the idea of the role that the fitness coach will play when this technology finally comes. And it's somewhat already here, right? Today it's here. I also talk about, like, it's not that mainstream yet. I think I discussed an idea of, like, you go to, like, your neighbor's home and you're like, hey, what do you think about OpenAI or ChatGPT? And most people will have heard of it, but they haven't actually used it. So I think it's very, let's just call it, like, people that are early adopters are using this stuff right now and playing around with this stuff right now. But I wouldn't say that it's quite mainstream, at least not yet. And our consensus around the use of AI in coaching was, it's always been like, how can we, when it comes, how can we lean into it to give us more time to create stronger relationships with our clients? Or how can we lean into it to do the more mundane tasks so we can do the things that we know are a lot more important: alignment and connection, building the relationship, having strong conversations, all of those things. So now that it's here, we're still rolling with that idea, where it's like, how can we use this to leverage those things that we find to be just more valuable? We've been discussing over the last, probably, Georgia, like maybe 4 or 6 months, how we're going to leverage AI in our education, and more specifically in our platform in CoachRx. A big part of our roadmap in CoachRx includes an integration with AI almost across the board. But we want to do it right, and we're planning on what that means right now. And I know I mentioned it 2 minutes ago, but what does doing it right mean? I think it's just holding still for a little bit and seeing what this thing becomes. Not even from, like, a technological advancement standpoint, but from a legality standpoint. Like, we still don't have our heads wrapped around, like, what is legal. We'll talk about, like, ethics and stuff like that today, but a lot of countries don't have their heads wrapped around what's legal yet. I believe it was last week, the UK pushed out a pretty strong bill that's going to restrict a lot of artificial intelligence use based on certain parameters. So we're kind of just holding still, and we want to see what this is going to look like before we go all in on this. But for now, we're definitely doing our research. We're staying on top of the latest AI. We're creating education around the use of AI in coaching, and we're building resources for our coaches, for you guys to leverage the technology. So we'll kind of talk through those resources that we're building as we get to the end of the call. Okay, first let's talk about what the heck is AI, and what is this ChatGPT thing. So AI, or artificial intelligence, it's a branch of computer science that involves creating machines and software that can behave, quote unquote, intelligently. ChatGPT is a specific type of AI. So the GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which is a type of AI model that's been trained on a lot of internet text. So anyone that's used ChatGPT, there's just that little notice at the bottom that's just like the cutoff date was, I think it's like September, November 2021. So it's using that vast amount of text, but it's using that internet text up until the end of 2021. There's extensions that you can get that can actually make it live time on the internet, but it just makes the platform a lot worse when you plug in those extensions. But keep that in mind. So if you go into ChatGPT and you say what happened in January 2022, it's going to have no idea because that's not a part of its language model. So there's a lot of other AI driven platforms that have hit the market over the last few months, and a lot of them are actually using ChatGPT as their language model. So when I say language model, just think about this idea of it's pre-trained based on a set of information. And there's also some pretty interesting things in terms of like we call them like knowledge bases that we've built here, where it's like we've built knowledge bases on CCP and we can go in and ask that knowledge base any question and it like spits out answers based on the 2 million words that we dropped into this knowledge base on all of the education that we've ever put out. It's pretty impressive. But there's also copywriting platforms, there's video and photo editing platforms, there's note-taking platforms, there is coaching platforms, and we're going to see a lot more types of platforms leverage artificial intelligence as an efficiency, as an increase in efficiency, as well as just like, I think a lot of these platforms that are leveraging artificial intelligence right now, they're just doing it because it's available. Like, I don't think they're like the cleanest experience. I don't think that AI is actually needed in a lot of these platforms. It's just like available. So they're just like plugging it in. And that's what we didn't want to do, was just to like, embed like a ChatGPT interface in CoachRx and just say, well, we have AI now. So that's what I mean when we're taking our time and we're waiting to see how that thing shapes out and exactly how we want to use it. All right, before we dig into using AI in our coaching practice, I just want to hit a few ethical considerations. And Georgia and I hit these quite extensively in a backroom talk conversation that will be coming out sometime in the near future. Georgia, do you want to remind everyone when that comes out?
It'll be out next Monday, guys. You'll get an email and a message inside the platform to let you know.
Awesome. Yep, I knew that. So yeah, next Monday that'll be coming out. So we go pretty extensive here, but just wanted to bring these up on this call because I do think they're important. So we could separate these ethical considerations into just general human ethic practices as well as coaching ethic considerations. So the three that I wanted to hit on general considerations were privacy, bias, and transparency. So privacy, guys, we're using the internet, right? So just be very, very careful on the things that you put into the internet, especially as a professional coach working with a client that trusts you with sensitive information. Anyone that's had a one-to-one consultation with a client, those clients are opening up and they're telling you things that they don't want the world to know. So I know this is just like general best practices in coaching. But be careful with what we're plugging into these things. And I know I mentioned the UK piece at the top of this call. That's actually a restriction that they put out last week, where it's like you can't put sensitive information into these models. Are people in the UK doing it? Yeah, obviously, but technically it's illegal. So let's pay close attention to the information that we plug into these models, because quite frankly, we have no idea who has access to this information that we're plugging in. Number two is bias. So there's a lot of biases in AI. Let's just talk about ChatGPT specifically. There's a lot of bias in ChatGPT. These biases are, I assume, based on whoever the person behind the development screen is, right? So these are political, cultural, ideological, religious, every type of bias you can have. These models are naturally biased because they are built by humans. Okay, so this means that going to these models as the source to get an answer or an opinion or a response is not coming from an unbiased source. Probably a larger conversation. Is there a such thing as an unbiased source? Probably not. And then finally, there's transparency. So understanding how complex AI systems make decisions can be really challenging. And I've listened to so many interviews, conversations with a lot of people that actually build these things. And quite frankly, they can't even really answer exactly how these things work, which is a little bit scary. Yeah, it's a little bit scary. So for us to say we know exactly how these things work and it's this language model and it learns in this way, yeah, I think we're just putting wool over our own eyes. So transparency, we don't know how these things work. So this is sometimes referred to as the black box problem, right? There's a lack of transparency, and because we don't know where this information is coming from or why it gave a certain answer, it can sometimes create issues, right, with these AI systems, and it can impact the decisions that we make, so on and so forth. I told this story last week, but I don't know if you guys heard of the attorney in in New York State that used ChatGPT to build case law. And anyone that's familiar with what case law is, it's like, hey, I'm going to a judge and I'm defending my client, and I'm going to bring up 15 different cases in the past that would support our side and the way that these pieces were resolved. And he brought like 15 pieces of case law, and they were all wrong. Chat GPT just completely made them all up, and he just looked like an absolute fool when he had to admit, like, yeah, I just used AI because I didn't have time to put case law together. So again, transparency, bias, just giving out wrong information, right? So we have to be really, really careful there. In terms of coaching, yeah, prescribing what we know, doing no harm, and understanding that the human element is the most important thing in the coach-client relationship. That's our bias. Okay, so going back up to prescribing what you know. As coaches, we have to understand that what we prescribe to clients has a large impact. Okay, so in my opinion, we should use AI as kind of a co-pilot, right? So it's just like you're driving the ship, you're steering the ship at all time, and you're just using this AI model as a co-pilot to kind of help you out a little bit, to nudge you this way, to nudge you that way, to create better efficiencies. Okay, this doesn't mean that we're permitted to give random exercise, nutrition, lifestyle prescriptions to clients without us actually understanding why that AI model gave those exercise, lifestyle, and nutrition prescriptions. So we have to still stay true to only prescribing and giving our clients what we know and what we understand. Next is doing no harm. So as pro coaches, our clients trust us with their health, right? So we should take that trust really seriously. So again, we cannot blindly trust that AI model to create a prescription recommendation or an implementation without actually scrutinizing what that AI model is telling us to do with our clients. Okay. You know, more obvious example, you ask this AI model to give your client some nutritional recommendations, and the AI model doesn't know that your client has Crohn's disease or something like that, and you absolutely jack that client up, right? You just have to be that barrier, right? You have to always scrutinize what AI is telling you. Don't just take it at face value. Okay. And then finally, the human element. So this is around building relationship. Okay. So our coaching principles are built on building relationships. So we must prioritize that great relationship that we build with each one of our clients over using AI. Okay. So if using AI is going to take away from that, I would actually recommend just not using it. But what we're going to talk about today is how can we use AI, or how can we leverage AI to free up time and focus on better communication, more conversations, and better connection with all of our clients. George, anything pertinent in the chat box here? I kind of see that thing lighten up.
No, just a few little back and forths on the ethics and legalities of AI, but we can dig into all that stuff in the Q&A at the end. Some
Okay.
Meaty conversations to have.
Awesome. Cool. Looking forward to it. Okay, so let's talk about AI and coaching. So where these two things can intersect, in my opinion. So number one, we have to look at AI as a tool. Okay, as a tool. We can't look at AI as like a second brain. We can't look at AI as like this thing that we always go to as a first step, and then we're always just adjusting what AI is saying. It's just another tool. Okay. So it's not meant to replace you. Okay. But rather it's meant to be your assistant when you need that assistant. So coaches should view AI as a tool to help making their job easier and more efficient wherever it makes sense. And then we'll talk about where we think it makes sense here in a minute. Number two is understanding and being clear on your value proposition. I think we discussed this. I think there's a couple people on this call that were in that CCP group. We discussed this a couple cohorts ago. I think I brought up like AI and like told it to build like a 5K road progression. And then I gave it parameters and what my client's time trial was and how many days they had to train and all of that. And this thing built a pretty dang good 5K road progression. I think I asked it to build me an 8-week progression to improve that time trial. And I like showed that on the screen, and we had a conversation on value proposition. And my argument was, gone are the days as coaches we can lean into being the best program designers in the world as our top and leading value proposition. I'm not saying that program design is not important. I'm not saying that coaches shouldn't enjoy designing training programs. And I'm not saying that clients don't appreciate a good program design. But let's be honest, right? Like as coaches, program design is going to be the first place that AI replaces us. AI will be able to design better programs. It will be able to design. I wanted to pause and just like make sure I truly believe that. I think it will be able to design better programs than us and in a lot quicker amount of time as well, as long as it's given the right context. So to that point, gone are the days where we can lean on like, nope, I'm not a relationship builder. Nope, I don't dig deeper. All I do is I write the A, B's, and C's, and that's the value proposition. Because if that's the value proposition, your client's going to leave you as soon as they get into that app that does that just as good as you do. Okay. So I think we have to understand that value proposition. We should use AI to free up time. Okay. So one of the benefits of AI is that it can automate certain mundane tasks. It can free up our time to focus on, again, building relationships with our clients. And we should use this extra time to connect with our clients and more personalize their experience, whatever that means to your client. That might just be, connecting them a little bit better to their health and to their fitness. It might mean, being that ear that they chat to on that 30-minute consultation, right? It can mean a bunch of different things for a lot of different clients, but we should use it to free up time so we can put that time elsewhere, not free up time so we can like go sit on a beach and not do anything, right? I think a lot of coaches will use it for that, but that's not my argument. My argument is let's work the same amount of time, but allow AI to create, to lean into those mundane tasks so we can create additional value somewhere else, okay? And then finally, we have to balance AI and the human touch. So we should always look to strike a balance between using AI to enhance our coaching practice and always maintaining that human touch in our interaction with our clients. We're going to dig into this prompt library that we built on the website that we'll continue to update. And it's going to be really clear when you guys look at that prompt library. The way that we built that was to always include the human touch. So that we could have built it a different way. We could have built it and just said, oh, let's build this to completely automate everything so the coach can just like set it and forget it. And we intentionally didn't build it that way. We built it so that you always have to give this thing context. We built it so after you give it that context and it spits out whatever it spits out to you, you have to scrutinize it post that prompt, right? So that's just our way of saying like, okay, let's use AI, but let's also always have that human touch in every single interaction that we have with ChatGPT or whatever, Bing or whatever language model that we're using.
There's a great little conversation happening in the chat box right now, Coral, about online training specifically. And given that making relationships in the online space is harder than in person, I don't think anyone would argue with that. Is there a future for online coaching? And what seems to be coming out of that, and where I see it as someone who's a remote coach, I guess I have my own bias about this, but AI tools are especially valuable for coaches who are working in that online space because it does free up more time to allow that time-consuming relationship building stuff to happen, sending Loom videos, making sure you're giving really detailed consult recaps, remembering all of those important details about your clients that make a difference with those online relationships. So AI is going to help in-person coaches, but I think remote coaches stand to benefit from it potentially the most.
Yeah, I'm still in that camp as well, Georgia, where it's like it is a lot easier and a lot more effective to build a relationship in person. And I think it'll always be that way. But you know what? Looking at today versus 5 years ago, I think people are more accepting to having conversations and let's just call it building stronger relationships and connections online than they were 5 years ago for obvious reasons. But we always knew it would get to a place like that. Um, AI, I think it's like a push and pull though, right? It's like, having these tools at our fingertips for you online coaches. It's a huge benefit. But if you're not leaning into that relationship piece because we are always told that you can't build a relationship online, yeah, I think you're dead. Yeah, I think you're dead. And I don't think I think it was Aaron, I don't think it's being a therapist, right? I think it's just connecting with your client, right? I think it's connecting with your client. A big piece that we always talk about in terms of coaching clients is the educational aspect. Okay, so it's not always about just giving the prescription and just like turning your back and walking the other way. I'm sure there's a lot of coaches. I'm sure there's a lot of coaches on this call that have awesome conversations and consultation where they're actually breaking down the training program that their client went through. And I'm sure we all have some clients that like love nerding out about like, why did we do this? What's next? How should it have felt? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's just connection. And it's still around program design, but it's connection. So connection and alignment and all of those pieces, I don't think that's going anywhere. And I think we have to not allow it to go anywhere, because if we all say on this call and we agree, nope, online, you can't build relationships, automation, AI is the future. Let's just lean into that. It's like we're dead, right? We're gone. We're gone as coaches. So I think we all have to, I think it's a great question and I think it's a valuable conversation. But I think the fact that we're having it tells us that we really should lean into those pieces a lot more seriously right now. Because again, I don't think it's not mainstream yet, right? It's not mainstream. It will be mainstream, maybe next week, maybe next year. I don't know. It will be mainstream. But if we get on board with this and we start leveraging this and we get ahead of this, we're going to be ready for it when it becomes mainstream. But if you're the coach that's like head in the sand, you're just like, nope, my program designs are the best. Nope, I don't build relationships with my clients. And then this thing takes over and it becomes mainstream. I think you're going to be the coach that's dead.
Absolutely. I think that sometimes that fear and defensiveness around adopting AI and, oh, this could never replace me, comes from insecurity around what your value proposition is. So if you're feeling that way, it may be a good time to reflect and really think, what is it that you give to your clients that a machine never will be able to?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I'm going to hit this, and then we're just going to walk through just some examples of using the prompt library that we built in your practice. That'll be fairly quick. But before I did that, I just wanted to walk through these Chat GPT tips, and these tips are going to be relevant to any AI language model, and it kind of builds off of the ethical piece that we discussed as well. Tip number one is these models are only as good as the prompts that we give it. Okay. So this thing has if we're using something that's like open source, has a vast amount of information in it. Okay. So everything on the internet up into 2021, that's a lot of things. And that includes things like Reddit. So be careful. But it's only as good as the prompts that we give it. So the effectiveness of any of these AI models is only going to give us, it's almost like the conversation we have where it's like, if you want good answers, ask good questions. It's the same concept, but you're talking to a robot now. So we need to be specific and clear when asking these models questions, and we need to give instructions to the AI model on how we want that question answered. The more specific the prompt, the more specific the response from the AI model. And we walk through this more specifically in the class that's going to be dropping next week. Number two is we have to be really specific. So we have to provide specific information when using these AI models to supplement our coaching practice. So for example, if we're using AI to generate a nutrition plan for a client, we need to be really specific about the client's dietary restrictions, their food preferences, their nutrition goals, where they're at right now, all of those things. We have to give a lot of context and we have to be specific. Moving us to the next piece, we have to give context. Okay, so again, a lot of information being in these language models can be a good or a bad thing because there's conflicting information in these models as well. So it can tell you one thing today and tell you something completely different tomorrow because it's looking at two different sources. Okay, so it's actually not smart enough at this point to understand what's right and what's wrong. So we have to give this thing context. Okay, so we should provide that context when using these models whenever we dig in. Okay, so this means providing information in our coaching practice. This means providing detailed information about who the client is, their sex, their age, their goals, their medical history, their current lifestyle practice, their metrics if you're trying to build a training program, all of those things. Okay. Again, this goes back to the black box problem, but it's understanding its limitations. Okay, so we need to understand the limitations of these AI models. So they're not perfect and they make a lot of mistakes. So we always need to double check the information provided by these models, and we need to make sure that they're accurate. And more importantly, we need to make sure that what it's telling us is appropriate for the clients that we're giving it to. The next piece is just iteration. Okay, so we need to continue to iterate and improve whenever we're using these AI models. Okay, so this means digging deeper, right? So it's kind of weird talking about a language model and having a conversation with it, but that's kind of how you have to treat it, right? So you're in ChatGPT and you ask it a question, it's like follow up, follow up, follow up. If it's not giving you the exact answer that you're looking for, contextually, you just have to continue to iterate, right? Well, no, I meant this. No, I meant that. I was telling Georgia this last week. It's kind of interesting and a little bit scary, but these things are actually built to understand your emotions. So by your words, of course. So what I mean by that is if you use words like, I'm becoming impatient, or why can't you just get this right? It actually uses more bandwidth to try to get it right so it doesn't make you upset, which is kind of weird. So like mess around with it, going to the next point, experiment with these things. And you'd be maybe not surprised, but it's very interesting how these things are built. You can almost see like the parameters and the tone that they're telling these things to use and all of that based on how you interact with it. So the last piece is just experiment with these things. So we should experiment with a lot of different AI models to truly understand them. So that would be like the Bings, that would be the Chat GPTs, that would be Google's language. I forgot what Google's language model is called, but Google's language model, just using all of those. Bard. So this means using all those platforms, trying different use cases, soliciting different feedback, using different clients with different goals, seeing what it comes back with, iterating a ton, giving it more context, being more specific, building chats and telling it to refer back to a different chat, all of those things. So just really experiment with it. And if you follow these pieces, you'll just get better at getting those answers more clearly and more concisely. Okay, we're going to kind of roll through the next three. The first piece is communication. So on these pieces, I just kind of, we just added some screen grabs from CoachRx using ChatGPT, like those, what's already pasted there in ChatGPT. Those are just examples of the prompts that prompt library that we'll talk about here in a minute. And then just an example of this thing going through a consultation and like putting some oomph behind it a little bit. So communication, how can we use this? How can we use AI in communication with our clients? The very first thing I go to is just like a consultation use case. So anyone that's ever sat down and had a consult with their client, the last thing you want to do is like have pen and paper and just like writing paragraphs or typing paragraphs on a computer. So what it can do, or how we can leverage this, is we can just write very quick and succinct bullet points, right? Based on that consultation, using terms like to do, using terms like, this was good, this was bad, this is what we need to improve, this is what we need to do here or there. And then we could just paste it in using the prompts that we provide in that prompt library. And then we can get a pretty good paragraphed response that we can now send our client over as a, let's call it like a consultation recap. Okay, so for those of you guys that are using CoachRx, you'll notice that we have those client reports, right? So plugging these in your private notes, using ChatGPT to create something a little bit more robust, that's more personalized to your client, and that's more conversational, pasting those in that client report, and then exporting that over to your client. That all takes you 3 minutes, and it's a really good experience for your client. And they just feel really good that they get that really quick recap of what you guys talked about. You're reminding them in terms of like, hey, these are the prescriptions that we're moving forward with. Here are some changes that we're doing with your supplements. This is what your program's going to look like. Here's what we're shifting, so on and so forth. So we can use it in consultations. We can use it in just general responses. And we can use it in a lot of different ways. But again, and you guys will notice it when you get into that prompt library, use your own ideas and your own thoughts. Okay, don't let this thing kind of have free reign. And when you see the way that we built that prompt library, we really wanted to build some pretty robust guardrails around that, where we're not giving it freedom to just say what it wants to say. And that'll make more sense when you guys really get in that prompt library and see how we set those up. Okay, so nutrition and lifestyle. So one thing that these models are great at, guys, is analyzing large amounts of information or large amounts of data. So a really obvious spot is using it for nutrition, right? Really understanding how we can take someone's let's call it like a caloric or macronutrient profile and create a net new one based on personalized inputs. So you'll kind of see on the screen there was a nutrition profile laid out. Then there's sex, height, weight, age, activity level, goals, and then any additional information. And this thing will spit out a pretty detailed nudge as to, hey, think about doing this because of that, and so on and so forth. So it's awesome at analyzing a large amount of data. But we have to be really careful and not let this thing, again, blindly recommend prescriptions. So a couple pieces I have here is like, just give success context. Okay, so it's like, this is what success means to this client. This is what their goals are. This is where they're at right now. This is where they're trying to move relative to where they've been. Just giving it as much context as possible is extremely beneficial. And then again, giving it personal context as well. Okay, so what do you have? Do you have in-body data? Do you know what their BMR is relative to where they're at today? Do they want to gain muscle? Do they want to lose fat? Like, what are those goals? Just giving this thing as much context as possible can be really, really beneficial. So all of these things that are being generated on the screen, we have examples of these in that prompt library. But essentially what this did was gave me like a breakdown of like exactly where they're at right now as a recap based on the personal information context that I gave it, said this is where you should consider going, and then gave me a specific prescription with context as to why it gave me that prescription, because I asked for that context. So you could take this or leave it, right? Like you don't have to say this is exactly what I'm doing. You could just use this to like generate ideas and thoughts. Okay. And then this is just me just going and putting this information as a private note in that client's profile. All right. And then finally, using this thing for program design. Gosh, there's probably a million use cases in how we can use this for program design. What you're seeing on the screen, and again, as a part of that prompt library, is I'm taking information from a client's movement screen. Okay. So I'm saying, this is what, again, giving it context, right? This is what success means. This is what we're looking for. This is why we're testing the squat and the pull and all of those things, giving it those success measures. When I do a side plank, the goal is this, it's not that. So giving it those success measures, and then putting in actual information. They failed this. This is what I noticed in them failing this assessment, going across the board, giving those assessment goals. And then it's going to generate for this, for me, because what I asked it was to give me some ideas on exercise selection based on the client's capabilities, based on the movement screen that I took the client through. And again, as long as you have the information, this is going to take you 3 minutes, and it's just going to generate a bunch of info. Okay. So this info that it generates, it could just be a nudge, right? I think that's where these using AI can be really beneficial. It's just like nudges, thought experiments, ideas that you may have not thought about, or even confirmation on what you were thinking of doing, right? So just using it as that co-pilot or that assistant. Okay, so streamlines the process. It can generate ideas. You have to give it, I know I've said this 100 times, but it's so important. You have to give it personalized prompts. Okay, don't just go in and say, what should I do with a client that fails an air squat, right? It's going to just like give you a bunch of craziness. Okay, so really personalize those prompts, and don't use as a conclusive model, right? Don't just say, because this thing told me to do this, I have to do that. So just wanted to walk you guys through kind of specifically how we can use it in communication, lifestyle, nutrition, as well as program design.
Carl, because it's so relevant to what you're discussing right now, we did have a question from Cam asking, will this data ever be generated using OPEX education and principles rather than anything on the internet? What's your answer to that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what we're playing around with now. Cam is, I mean, we've already built our own language models, or like our own knowledge bases. So that's what we will use. So we're just using our own language models and knowledge bases, and it won't be looking at all internet text from 2021. It would just be looking at the information that we give it. So yeah, definitely. And the beneficial thing there as well is it doesn't just end, right? It's like we could put 2 million characters inside of that thing. And then as we grow, as we change our mind, as we learn new things, we're just going to add to that, right? So that's the exciting thing, is we can build our own knowledge base there. All right. And then finally, I think, Georgia, they'll be sent this after, I believe.
I just dropped a link in the chat box, but it's also coming out by email after.
Cool. Yeah. So this is the database that we built, and this thing is we're going to continue to update this. So what we did was we separated by category, use case, how to use. So essentially we wanted to build it so you would just copy and paste that prompt right to the right of how to use. And then you'd plug in your client's information. And I just wanted to give some examples of screenshots of the information that we put in, what it gave us, so on and so forth. So this is just to get started, but this thing is going to grow as we put other pieces in. So those categories are going to be program design, lifestyle, they're going to be nutrition, and they're also going to be communication. So the idea there was just to help coaches and just give them ideas on how they can leverage it. And it was really important for us to kind of get ahead of this a bit, even before we have it in our platforms, because we did want to kind of put our stake in the ground and say, like, based on what we have available to us right now, this is how we think we should use this as coaches. Okay. Because we are adamant that it should not be a free-for-all, right? It should not be a free-for-all. And I know ChatGPT is just so, and this is probably what makes it so good. It's so open, right? You just go in and you just type whatever you want in there, and it just gives you like really interesting results back or answers back. But we just wanted to create a framework around this for coaches as a starting point. So we'll continue to we'll continue to grow this. Yeah, so that I was going to say one more piece on that, Georgia, but I think I'm going to wait till Q&A because I think it'll come up there. But that's all I have.
Awesome. And for those who aren't already in CoachRx, now is a great time to start a free trial. Get in there, use some of these AI prompts that we have provided. I'd recommend starting that trial and downloading that AI prompt library at the same time, and really getting your feet wet, starting to develop your literacy in prompting AI more efficiently. Even though we don't have those native tools available now, you're going to be better at using them if you start playing with AI tools now. And Carl, could you share just a little bit about the migration support that we do have available for coaches who are already in a different platform looking to come over?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have transition assistance. Well, let me back up. So we allow coaches to transition their own clients over. So we have a CSV driven feature that you go in, you just drop all of your clients' data in there. So that's demographic data, any metrics or fitness monitoring that you want to drop in there to bring over. Um, CoachRx runs it. You upload that. CoachRx runs a background job, creates all of your clients in the platform, sends all of your clients welcome emails, and then you can go from there. Um, we have personalized transition assistance for anyone that's bringing 50 plus clients over. So in that personalized transition assistance, we do that for you. So you get a call, we'll knock that out for you. We'll just need you to give us the data to be able to do that. We're also opening up a couple different options right now. So these are in I think we hedge and we say things are in beta when we're not like sure. But these are in beta. We've done it for a few coaches thus far. So for certain platforms, we're able to bring over workout history now. So we have a couple new devs that crack the code on that. So we're able to bring over workout history for certain platforms for all of your clients. So what that means is your clients are uploaded, they're put in, and then all of their workouts that they've ever done are now in their CoachRx calendar, as well as in their exercise history. So when they click exercise history, they'll know what they've done in the past. We also offer the ability in that transition assistance. If we have someone that comes over and you're like, oh, I have 1,000 exercise library videos that I filmed myself, am I gonna have to upload those? Just send us a CSV. We'll get those all put into your account or into your organization for you. As well as we're now implementing bringing over programs. So we had a coach that reached out and had like 250 programs that they were bringing over. So we had a discussion with the developers, and they again cracked the code on that to bring over programs as well, and the assignment of those programs for clients. So I know that was a lot, but we're really leaning into helping coaches transition as seamlessly as possible.